Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel and to my knitting podcast series. I am super duper excited to have you with me today. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Samantha and I am the knitter, knitwear designer, vlogger, PhD student behind the Strikkechick. So you would never be able to tell from all the snow that is currently in Tromsø, the Norwegian Arctic Circle village where I live, but spring has officially sprung. I know the rest of the world, for the most part, seems to be enjoying some really nice flowers and sun and good weather. We just had Easter holidays and it was completely snowy. It was a little bit rainy. We went to the mountains up to a really, really beautiful part of Norway called Senja. And because it was a little bit too rainy to ski and we didn't really want to snowshoe because the snow was a little bit damp, so we kind of had like a hotel kind of pampering type vacation there. And we did drive around a lot. I brought a lot of outdoor knits because I know people have been kind of interested in seeing what Norwegian turgensers or trip sweaters look like in action. So I brought those along and I documented all of it. So hopefully I'll be able to splice that together for you guys as a vlog in the future. But for now, because it's spring, the end of Easter, so I think officially things are going to start warming back up. I think the snow is going to melt this month. And so I am in the mood. No, I have spring knitwear on my mind, basically. Because I want it to be ready. When I say spring knits, what I really mean are like good summer day knits in Tromsø. So if I start on them now, I can have some of them ready for when it's actually warm enough to wear them. So like maybe even a whole 15 degrees Celsius, which is like 60 degrees Fahrenheit, is like a good summer day for us. So yeah, it would be nice to have some warm weather knits to be able to wear for when the temps get up there in the positives. Yeah, so I actually have compiled a list of spring knitting patterns. And one of them actually is the one that I have on today, not the cardigan, the top. This is the one that I want crop by Lily Kate Makes. I knit it in Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino, and I did the crochet edging with some Drops Lima, which is a DK weight yarn. I think I made it a little bit too tight. I definitely, because I got to a point mid-bust where I was like, okay, I'm using a little bit of a thicker yarn than the pattern called for, so I think that I will just crop out a couple rows. But yeah, I think in hindsight it was a little bit too tight. So one of the patterns I'm gonna make this spring is hopefully the one that I want crop top, in some really, really pretty yarn. This is Thought to Thread Ritual DK in Seattle Gray. It's a really, really pretty 100% non-superwash merino DK weight yarn from Tyler of Thought to Thread, who is an independent dyer out in California. And this is really special yarn to me because this yarn was gifted so that I could design the Kamari sweater, which is a really nice all-over cable sweater that maybe it's getting a little bit too warm to wear now, so it's being packed away until next season, but really fun knit if I do say so myself. And I have this skein and a little bit of change left over, and that's actually enough, I think, to make the one that I want crop. So I think that is going to be one of my spring knitting goals, is to make a better fitting the one that I want crop. I'm still deciding, so I do still have a little bit of Drops Lima in this off-white color that I could use to do the borders, but I think this top would look really, really cool actually if it was all over like monotone. So if I knit it in this color and then also did the crochet edging in this color, I think that would be a really cool top. And I would hopefully knit it a bit longer. I think I would just, because this you can't see it in the frame right now, but I'll pop a picture of myself wearing it at some point. But it's pretty short. And I think it's okay for vests and sweaters to be that short because I like to layer them over dresses, but you can't really layer this kind of camisole top over dresses, and I really don't like the feeling of my stomach being out. So I think I would make it a little bit longer, not too much, maybe like a centimeter or two, just so it sits kind of comfortably where it should. But yeah, this is my first knitting project, or potential spring knitting project of the season, which is spring. Oof. Yeah, so we'll see if I get that cast on. And another really cool theme about the projects that I'm showing you for my spring cast-ons is that they almost entirely use stash yarn, and quite a few of them actually use yarn that's left over from other projects. Ever since I cast off my leftover mohair sweater, which was part of the Scrappy Stashy Make-Along by Selma Knits on YouTube, I have just been kind of like really motivated to dig into my stash, and especially my leftover yarn stash, because it feels a little bit like putting together pieces of a jigsaw puzzle to kind of make something that fits out of these little scraps, like trying to put colors and textures together that match well, and then like the right yarn for the right needle size, and seeing what kind of project it can go into. I think that is really cool. So a lot of what I'm going to show you is going to be leftover yarn from other projects. So I'll tell you, like I did with the thought to thread yarn, what project they've been used for in the past, and then I will also tell you what I'm going to use it for in the spring, hopefully. So my next hopeful spring cast on, and this is stash yarn, but it isn't leftover yarn, is the Poppy Genseren, or the Poppy Sweater by Line Langmo for Dalegarn. This is a pattern that is written in Norwegian. I downloaded the pattern off of Dalegarn's website, but I know that Line Langmo, who is a kind of very trendy Norwegian knitter, she made her first sample herself and she posted it on her blog. I don't know if she's still active on her blog, but she definitely used to be. She made a lot of knitting patterns and she would put them on her blog for free. They weren't the most size inclusive because they were just blog posts that she would put out with her pattern. And I think she made her sweaters very oversized, but she made them like a one size fits all kind of ordeal. And I knit the, I think it's actually called the Line Langmo sweater of hers. It's this kind of sweater that's inspired by a Free People sweater that she saw, and either her or her mom knit the sweater using some Norwegian yarns and her own Line Langmo Påfugl yarn that Dalegarn carried. So this sweater, and I'll pop a picture of it in the side so you can see, it is really pretty because of how she does the color transitions. So she kind of starts out using a yellow mohair, and then she goes into using a pink mohair, but the way that she transitions the colors, especially with this color combination, it turns orange, like a mango-y orange in the middle, and it looks like a very seamless sunset kind of gradient, which is really cool that she's only doing that with two colors. So that is something that I wanted to do, and I wanted to use the colors that she had used. So I picked these up when Line Langmo Påfugl was on clearance, because they were rebranding as Myk Påfugl, which means soft peacock. Påfugl means peacock. But yeah, so I have, it's a very lemony yellow, thick mohair, and a very kind of baby pinkish thick mohair, and I am planning on using these two for the Poppy sweater. The only modification I'm going to make to it is that sweater is knit in two parts and then it's seamed together, but it could very easily be knit in the round. So I'm just going to change it so that it's knit in the round, and then use split for the armholes and knit that back and forth. after that point, because I think that'll just be a more seamless knitting experience. Seamless, I mean seamless as in like it'll flow better, but I guess it's also kind of more seamless. That's a good one. But yeah, that is gonna be the poppy sweater. And I know that's not like a very spring-y knit. I guess you would think it's not a very warm weather knit, but the reason why I'm putting it on my spring knitting list is because it's still very, very chilly in the spring and the summer. It's definitely still sweater weather most days. Sometimes we get a good week here or there where it's kind of like high 20s Celsius, and then you're like, okay, no, I don't feel like I need a sweater. But most days it's like kind of cold, kind of windy. You still need like a jacket when you're walking to and from work. So a mohair sweater would not be that, bizarre for the spring or summer. But the reason why it's a spring or summer knit is because of the color scheme, because it's very, very springy, very like floral and bright and happy. And so that's why I am calling it a spring knit. So I am motivated to cast it on because it's a good season for it. All right, moving on. The next knit that I want to cast on and hopefully cast off this spring is the Barbro blouse by Knitting for Olive. I picked up yarn for the blouse when I visited Copenhagen in the Christmas 2021? Yeah, it was a while ago. I visited my cousin and his family in Copenhagen, and I picked up Knitting for Olive Merino in the shade Unicorn Purple. It's this really, really pretty light lilac-y shade. It's just kind of gorgeous. And I have 4 skeins of this to knit the Barbro blouse. I think it's very seasonally appropriate for the spring or summer. It's like I'll pop a picture of it up, but it's a lace knit blouse that fits kind of tightly. It has like button closures in the back. I'm thinking about doing pearls for this. I think that would look really nice. And I haven't cast it on because it's such a small needle project, and I was like, this yarn will sit in my stash, and maybe it's more kind of important to get thicker yarn out of my stash before I cast on something really small. But I don't know, I'm really feeling a kick for smaller needles and very dainty knits at the moment with kind of more pastel-y colors. So this is one of the cast-ons I am thinking of for the spring. And also it would be really, really fun to wear. I have quite a few high-waisted jeans that I think it would look really nice with. And it would also look really nice with some high-waisted skirts. I don't know how it would look over dresses. I don't think I would do that. But yeah, definitely skirts and high-waisted jeans, and it would look really, really nice. And it would also be a really good transitional piece, because I think this color is really good for fall too. So I think it could transition you really, really well from the spring and summer into the fall, and then it's just you're layering with more coats and maybe like a cardigan over it or something like that. You can never have too much wool in Tromsø is something that I have learned. But yeah, that is another item on my to knit list. Okay, moving on. Another item that I really, really want to knit this spring is the Golden Orchids shawl. And I was introduced to this actually on knitting Reddit. So for those of you out there who don't know that there's like a knitting subreddit, there is. It is super fun. It's really, really, it's kind of, I use it a little bit like Ravelry to see what other people have made. But it's also really good for people asking questions. You can usually find a lot of advice there. You get to see like people post like rants and stuff. It's like it's kind of like a Ravelry forum, but like better structured, I think. So it's really fun for that. And I was browsing the knitting Reddit the other day, and I found a pattern or a finished object for the Golden Orchids shawl. And I've been looking for a lace knit shawl pattern to use this yarn for, and I just thought that was absolutely perfect. So I put it in my Ravelry queue, and I am going to cast it on with this yarn. This is Drops Alpaca Mirasol, which is discontinued now, but I do have like 7 or 8 skeins of it in my stash. It's the colorway 848, it's the colorway 2032 and the dye lot 848. They don't have like an official color on here, but it's a very bluish purpley color. Like it's almost purple, but I think it's mostly light blue. It is 100% alpaca yarn. And I'm not really too concerned because like I think the Golden Orchid shawl pattern calls for 4mm needles, and it uses relatively light yarn, and this yarn calls for 3.5mm needles, which means a 4mm needle would probably be pretty good for lace knitting because you want to use bigger needles for that. But I'm not too concerned about the gauge because it's a shawl, and I plan to kind of wrap it around and use it as a scarf. And I think that would look really nice. I've been saying that I really want to knit a shawl, and I think this one, because it's a little tinier than like a whole, the big wingspan type shawl. So it's a good kind of introduction to shawl knitting, and also it's something that I probably would get more use out of in my wardrobe because it's small enough that I can just kind of wrap it around and go. I mean, I don't think, because I don't know how much I would use blankets, like shawl blankets at the moment, so I've been steering clear. And then I'll still have some yarn left over from the 7 or 8 skeins of this, so that if I find another beautiful shawl pattern, I can make one, or I can make a vest, or I don't know. I mean, the possibilities are endless, as I am discovering with leftover yarn. So I am excited to get that going. I think part of what inspires me so much about spring and summer knitting is that the projects themselves are a bit smaller. So it feels nice to like, I did a video of like, 10 sweaters that I want to knit this fall/winter. And I think I got through like half of them. And then I have a couple more that are cast on but not finished. And it feels kind of, it's like, there's no way you're going to get through that list. You're not going to knit like all those 10 sweaters because they're sweaters, they're huge. But when you have spring and summer projects, like a lot of these are like 1 or 2 skein type projects. Like the one that I want crop won't take up more than 1 hank of this yarn. So it feels nice to be like, I want to knit this and this and this and this because it's doable. Like it's actually something that you could do and finish within the season. So I'm excited to report back to you guys actually about how much of it I actually get done and what I end up liking and wearing the most out of the things I want to knit this spring and summer. Another pattern that I want to knit this warmer knitting season is the Elena socks. I showed you guys this Drops Flora on my Drops yarn haul video that I filmed last fall, but when I talked to you about it then, and I showed you, because this is a blend of alpaca and wool and there's no synthetic fiber in it, and a lot of people commented saying don't use this yarn for socks because it'll get holes really easily because there's no synthetic fiber to add strength. And so I kind of put that aside and I was like, okay, fine, I will not knit socks with Drops Flora then. But then earlier this year, I met up with Inga from Knitting Traditions, and she said that she saw that part of my podcast, but that one thing she does is that if she wants to knit socks with fingering weight yarn that doesn't have synthetic fiber in it, she holds it together with a strand of mohair, and that gives it all the strength you need. And ordinarily I would be like, oh my gosh, mohair in socks, like that would make my feet super, super warm, but it's Tromsø, like it's freezing cold all the time. So I think mohair and socks would be perfectly okay. So I will buy like a matching kid silk mohair for this, and I will make the Elena socks with this Drops Flora. It is colorway 15. It's like I think it's just called green on their website, but it's kind of like it's not like a bright apple green, it's not like a very muted jade green, it's somewhere in the middle, which I think makes it really, really pretty. And this will be my first ever pair of socks, just like it will be my first ever shawl, so I am excited to knit something different. I just hope, so I know that I'm going to get second sock syndrome, so it's going to be like, okay, I cast off the first sock, I have to knit the second sock, like immediately. There's no taking a break between the two socks because that's happened to me for sleeves, it's happened for mittens or gloves. So no, not with this. We're gonna knit them both in one go. Okay, so the last, well, actually not the last, but one of the last projects I have to show you guys is, well, one of the last yarns I have to show you guys is this. I want to use my leftover Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair that I used to make the olive sweater my size earlier last year, because I have almost 4 whole skeins of leftover Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair. And that's almost enough for an entire garment. So what I wanted to do with it was make the boxy mohair cardigan, I believe it's called, by Friday Knits, but I'll pop the official name down below. It's a very cute kind of cropped mohair cardigan with short sleeves. It's got like a collar. It's because my whole thing was I've already made the olive sweater my size, which is in this color. I don't want another sweater in this color in my wardrobe. If it was more of like, if it was an off-white or like a beige or something, you know, fine, whatever. But I think this is, for me, this is kind of distinctive, and so I just didn't want something very similar to the olive sweater. I was considering, and I mentioned this in one of my earlier videos, I was considering holding this with a strand of some kind of merino to make the Poetry Pullover by Sari Nordlund. But I kind of cast that idea aside because I think the patterning on the Poetry Pullover is just a little too similar to the patterning on the olive sweater my size, and then I would basically have 2 sweaters that look very similar. And so I wanted to do something different with this. So I think that doing a boxy cropped short-sleeved cardigan would look really different to the olive sweater my size, and I can use that as a way to knit up my leftover Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair. Also, because Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair is so nice to have against your bare skin, I don't think that would be a problem for something like that, which is kind of, you know, you wear like a camisole under it and then that's basically all you have on. It's not like you have, like when I wear my sweaters in the winter, I have like a big long underwear type wool shirt underneath them, so it doesn't matter how itchy they are because yeah, I mean, there's always like a layer of protection from the itch. So this is very nice and non-itchy, and it would feel nice to have on. Okay, moving on, we're getting to the last bits of yarn, which are these two. So I have a whole skein of Knitting for Olive pure silk in the shade Olive, also left over from the olive sweater my size. And I have like a teensy weensy bit more than a skein of alpaca silk from Sonneness Garn, which is a alpaca and silk blend, and there's 200 meters in a 50-gram skein here, and here you get 250 meters in a 50-gram skein. So what I wanted to do with these is I am actually really craving some cute neck scarves this season. Like, think My Favorite Things knitwear scarf number 1 and number 2, something like that. Just, I think it would be really nice to just, you know, be able to like wrap it around my neck when I'm wearing a cute sundress, or wear it like a bandana to keep the hair off my face. It would, or, you know, even like wrap around your purse. Like, I have these silk scarves that I've bought, that are not knitted, but they're just scarves that I've bought, and sometimes when I want to feel extra fancy, I wrap one around the handle of my purse when I go out, and I'm just like, yes, couture. So yeah, I'm thinking I want to make some hand-knitted square scarves, like handkerchief, bandana, scarf type things. So that's what I'm thinking of doing for these two. I'm thinking of knitting My Favorite Things knitwear scarf number 2, maybe for this one, because that would be kind of cute with the patterning on that scarf. And then, I don't know, maybe I'll design my own for this, or I will find another pattern that works. So yeah, that because this yarn is significantly softer than the Knitting for Olive pure silk, but it also seems like it kind of attracts more floof, and it kind of, you know, it sheds more than this. So it's got its ups and downs. But yeah, I think it would be really nice. And that's because of the alpaca, isn't it? It's because this is pure silk, but this is like an alpaca silk blend. And it's actually 70% baby alpaca, 30% silk. So it's definitely, I mean, it feels a lot more like alpaca than silk. It's kind of, it gets its sheen, I think, from the silk. Whereas this is like, it's going to be really, really nice for warmer weather. So maybe I'll knit this up first, and then if I like the experience, then I will get around to knitting this up as a scarf. Or whatever scarf I knit up with this can also be a transitional scarf into the fall, because this is a very fall color. This is like a plum. I think it's actually called plum rosa, which is like apple pink or something. But yeah, oh, get closer so you can actually see. And this is the Knitting for Olive soft silk. So yeah, I think these are going to be a very nice pair of neck scarves. Okay, I actually forgot about one last project that I have to show you, and it's in this very crinkly bag. So, okay, one of the things I want to make, and this is entirely Scrappy yarn, I want to make the Robina sweater by Anne Wenzel, who is a very, very talented Danish knitwear designer. Let's see if I can balance all this. I'm gonna grab my last skein of yarn, and then you can see all the colors together for now at least. I wanna make a Robina sweater by Anne Wenzel in this kind of colorway. So she very recently made a leftover yarn version of her pattern, the Robina sweater. And she is the queen of leftover yarn. She is so talented when it comes to using up her scraps. And like most of her patterns are, it seems like they're designed so that you can use up scrap yarn in a garment that looks like really cohesive and nice. So that's what I want to do with this yarn. I've got some Sandnes Garn Koss in here, which I used to make the Marius Yule sweater. I've got some Drops Air in the shade Pink Sand and Coral Reef, which I used to make the Air pullover and my mom's version of the Soleil vest. And I have some Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino. I have the shade that actually went into the top that I'm wearing, and I have the shade that I used to make my Davenport camisole sample. And I have some hip wool, which I used to make the Rewind sweater from Hip Knit Shop. So they gifted me the hip wool, and I have a little bit left over. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of the color scheme I'm feeling. It's very springy, very kind of, it's bright, but it's like, it's got some pastels in there. Oh, I'm just gonna put those away. Yeah, so I am, that's gonna be, I think, one of the last projects of my spring-summer knitting plans, because it's definitely missing some yarn. So I think that there are some projects I'm working on right now. Like, for example, I'm knitting the Euros sweater by Aegyo Knit in Drops Air in the shade, I think it's like raspberry. It's a very purplish pink, but that could very easily go into that palette as well. I'm knitting the Sophie shawl, and then also knitting the Christiane Svingenser by Annette Oppheim in Drops Air in the shade Purple Haze, which is, I think I've showed you that colorway before, but it's like a really, really pretty lilac-y with like little bits of pink and blue, which could also go into the colorway really well. So I think that's just gonna be like it's super fun. I spent this morning actually just digging through my leftover stash, being like, does this color work and this color work, and how does that fit in? And it's super duper fun. And I think once I kind of get my whole palette together, like a little bit more than I would need for the actual sweater, then I will cast on, and I will just kind of go with my gut, the way that I did for the leftover mohair sweater, and we're gonna see what comes out of it. But it feels super, super, super nice to use up stash yarn and to use up leftovers. Partly because I feel like I welcomed a lot of yarn into my stash the last 2 years. And it feels nice to make things with the yarn, but especially the leftover yarns, because it's yarn that I've used for something really special, and so now it reminds me of that. And so whenever I wear my leftover sweaters, I'm like, oh yeah, that's the yarn from this, and that's the yarn from that, and it's like, it's kind of, I don't know, it's like a little Mod Podge amalgamation of all the cool knitting projects that I've made. And it's like, wow, I have knit so much that I had enough yarn left over from these individual projects to make another project. That is super cool. Yeah, so it feels nice, and it's really fun for me to put colors together. I actually have a video on choosing colors for your knitwear. I'll link to that just so you can see, but that was kind of like a lot of the stuff that I thought about when I was putting colors together for all of my leftover projects. If you're interested in putting together your own leftover knitting project from your stash. So I really, really hope that you enjoyed this video. I would love to know what your spring knitting plans are. Have you already gotten started on them? I know a lot of people already have. It is quite warm in a lot of the world. So I would love to see what you're working on and hear what your dream knits would be for the rest of the spring and summer. If you want to come over and say hi to me outside of YouTube, then I am over on Instagram and Ravelry and TikTok as the Strikkechick, and you can also find me on my own website, thestrikkechick.com. If you want to stick around for more knitting, yarny, fun videos, go ahead and give this a like and subscribe, and yeah, just leave me a comment telling me what you enjoyed about it and what you want to see more of. So until next time, you guys, happy knitting! Bye!